Always check with your physicians before making any changes to your treatment plan. This was an archived episode from the first season, so what better way to end the second season with this episode?
So nutrition interventions that you can do is you want to make sure that the three main things for constipation are going to be adequate hydration, making sure to get enough fluids, more fruits and veggies because that's fiber. It helps to bulk in our stools and move them through to help them pass easier, and then a little more activity. So whatever light activity you can do that will also help to move bowel movements along. So those are the three main ones.
Welcome to Living with Anxiety with your host, Rosaria Kozar. I'm so delighted to welcome back Nichole Giller. She's a nutritionist, and she's back to visit with us to tell us some more information than she covered in episode 5. The 5th episode discussed the importance of having a positive relationship with food, and she also debunked some theories about some diets. But today she's here concerning side effects. And obviously, our children suffer from numerous side effects that affect their appetite. But how can we get them to eat? How can we help with those side effects by providing foods that remedy them? Well, that's why Nichole's here today, and she's going to tell us all about it. So, welcome, Nichole.
Thank you so much, Rose, for having me. Yes, I am a registered dietitian, and I specialize in oncology nutrition. And yeah, I'm really excited to share and talk with you today.
Well, I'm so happy to have a registered dietitian on here. And like you said, you are a oncology dietitian. So that's why it's so important to have someone like you with your expertise on the show. So can you tell us some of those side effects and how to remedy them through nutrition?
Yes, I would love to do that. So where I wanted to first start out with was when your child is having a poor appetite or early satiety. And basically what that means is, they begin on their meal and soon quickly after they start, they're feeling full already. So they're not getting enough calories in. So we want to make sure to make food fun for children. We want to make sure to be very careful about not putting the pressure on them eating, even though we know the parents knows, the clinicians know, the registered dietitian knows that they do need nutrients. They're growing. They're also going through cancer treatment. But we want to find the best ways to make it fun for them, using lots of color or making it playful or pretending, we're somewhere else with our food or we're monsters eating our food. We want to make it as fun as we can for children because that would even be not in the hospital, at home. Those are ways that we can help encourage a healthy relationship with food. But here are some tips that you can add into while making it fun when your child has poor appetite or early satiety. And so basically, again, like I said, it's a loss of appetite, no desire to eat, or it's the feeling of being full after eating or drinking a very small amount. So some things that you would want to do is just provide small, frequent meals. I think that's a good idea to not overwhelm any child regardless. Whether they have cancer or not, or having treatment or not, smaller portions is best. It will actually also produce less waste, but less overwhelm is really important for the child when they're eating. And then calorie dense foods. So check the labels. What is the most amount of calories, in a serving? Like, for example, cheese is a pretty good example. There's a lot of calories, a lot of fat in there. Just a couple cubes of cheese, that's going to be more calorie dense than like 2 blueberries. You can still offer 2 blueberries too, but what I'm saying is you want to have more of those higher calorie foods. You want to eat by the clock rather than waiting for them to be hungry or have an appetite. So what you can do for yourself as the parent is setting times throughout the day and, just letting them know. Or if you're at the hospital, same thing, kind of keep them on a schedule and offering them food. Not necessarily saying, don't say you have to eat this or anything like that, but just saying like, hey, it's mealtime, prepare the food for them, make it look as beautiful and as fun as you can. And, offer them, like I said, eat by the clock. View eating as part of the treatment. This is more for the parent to understand because the child will not understand this. So just it's important to, focus on, okay, I have to figure out which foods are going to be the most calorie dense, have the most protein, and, offer the variety or not the variety that the child likes to eat, because this is a part of the treatment plan, because they are growing and undergoing treatment, and we want to support their healthy cells with food. If it's too tiring to eat at times, you can do milkshakes. You can do certain type of beverages like Boost or Ensure. It's really whatever the child, or Pediasure, whatever the child prefers. If they prefer Pediasure and they love it, then that is a great choice too. Do not feel bad, or, it's not okay to be shamed if you are saying like, well, my child is really feeling like Pediasure or milkshake. That's a great choice, and you should be proud of that. Give that to your child. Light physical activity to stimulate appetite. So that for adults too, but for children, just having them be active as much as they can, and that will actually encourage more of an appetite. Easy to prepare and serve foods to preserve energy. That's more applies for adults. I guess for them, it would just be maybe presenting the food to the child, ease for them to eat it. So make sure things are cut. If they have like a sauce they can dip in, have the sauce there and ready for them that they can dip their food in, have, all the utensils that they need, and then just making it fun, colorful utensils, or their favorite character. What's their favorite character? What can we get, the Mickey Mouse spoon or whatever it is. We want to make it really fun for the child, using different placemats if you can, placemats that you can color on, drawing the food on the placemat right next to the food that they're eating, just kind of finding ways to make it fun. And that will really help support the relationship, and then also encourage the child to eat more foods and enjoy their foods more. So that's really, that's mostly the recommendations for poor appetite and early satiety.
Well, those seems like some excellent recommendations, and I know I use some of those myself. So, especially making food fun to eat with the colors and
Yes.
And my son loved ice cream, so I gave him ice cream all the time, and he liked Pediasure as well. So, but that doesn't help with constipation, does it? Is there something that we can do for a child that has constipation?
Yes. Okay. So let's dive into those side effects. So we can talk about constipation first, and then I can go into diarrhea after that. So constipation, the definition would be a decrease in frequency of bowel movements, or very hard stools, hard to pass stools. Now this may be from dehydration, medication, or even mechanical changes from the anti-cancer therapy. So nutrition interventions that you can do is you want to make sure that the three main things for constipation are going to be adequate hydration, making sure to get enough fluids, more fruits and veggies, because that's fiber. It helps to bulk in our stools and move them through to help them pass easier, and then a little and more activity. So whatever light activity you can do, that will also help to move bowel movements along. So those are the three main ones.
I have a question, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but when you talk about mild activity, I know that you're a nutritionist, but you might have some ideas for that. Would something like, if it's too painful for them to walk, could they do exercises by like flapping their arms or sitting on the floor and you moving their feet? Would that count, or is that? Oh, it does.
Yes, it really does count. Movement of any time really does count. Getting the music going, making sure they're comfortable, but, having them, if they can sit and even like throw a ball back and forth with you. You can get creative in any way. Activity learning, or not learning, but activity where, they're moving, they're lifting things, they're, just engaged in any type of activity, whatever is comfortable with their pain level, that would work. Because you got to compare it to like, okay, well, let's say they were just in their bed, not moving, to, this activity that I'm going to do with them now, and so maybe something beyond like even a board game, like you want them to just be moving around, and playing as much as they can. And it really is different for everybody. Maybe a patient, your child was able to walk really well, just make sure you continue that. But maybe your child was not able to walk at all. So sitting on the floor and playing, or doing dancing with your arms, or playing catch, that's going to be a really big improvement. And that will also help.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, because I had absolutely no idea what exercises, we could do if our child was in fact immobile to some extent. So it's really nice to know that anything can constitute as that when it's movement. But in terms of the constipation, you were just about to get into the foods.
Yes, I am. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about that. And then also, even with physical activity, there's physical therapists too. They're going to be able to work around those certain pain points and give more ideas than the registered dietitian could give. So that's also another little note that I wanted to make to, join in more clinicians to help improve the activity.
Excellent.
But yes, yeah. So then let's, and now we can talk a little bit more about food. So you want to try to get as many fluids in for the child so that their urine is mostly a light color. There's no specific amount of water intake recommendations for children or adults. It really comes off of the urine color. So just paying attention to your child's urine color, mostly light yellow is the goal. You also can add in other fluids, not by drinking. Soups, oatmeals, cereal, fruits and veggies, those do contain so much water and liquid, and that actually does help with hydration. So that's something to point out. Tea will actually also help with hydration too. Even if there's some caffeine in there, it will still actually hydrate. So that's an important note to make.
Oh, wow.
Hot beverages. Yeah, right. It used to be like no coffee or tea, it'll dehydrate you, but actually no, they found now that it does actually contribute to hydration. So good news for coffee and drink drinkers. So
yes, definitely. Good news.
Right? Yes. So then the other thing is to kind of create a routine. What time of the day does your child like to have a bowel movement? Usually having a hot cereal or like a hot beverage around that time to help stimulate a bowel movement. We're going to have our best bowel movements when we are relaxed. And maybe on the situation of where your child is, it may not be as relaxed. So just try to find ways if they want to have quiet time or alone time or coloring, something to relax them to help stimulate with that bowel movement, but then also having that warm beverage or that hot cereal. We already talked about the light activity, stretching. Your child could also do some stretching. And then we just did talk about the scheduling, the adequate bathroom time. So those are really all the tips for constipation.
Wow. Well, that seems like it's some good information. And what about on the opposing end? What type of things should they be focusing on, caregivers in general, be focusing on for diarrhea?
Yes. So it's tricky because now I don't know, you tell me, did you experience a lot of like both at the same time, the constipation and the diarrhea kind of would alternate?
When his tumor grew, and maybe other people might experience this too, not only did it press on his kidneys, it also pressed heavily against his intestines, causing a huge backup. And he required this type of medication, and I don't know what it is, but it clears you out. And so he couldn't have something food related for that. Otherwise, we were more on the diarrhea end of the spectrum.
Okay. So basically diarrhea, your doctor would be able to let you know, and you probably would know what was going on with your child. But basically it's defined as, an increase in stools per day. Usually it would be a liquidy bowel movement, and it could be caused by multiple different things, like what you were saying with the tumor, the medication, stress, the environment, infection, things like that. Now, so nutrition interventions, let's dive in. So for eating, you want to really go with more low fat, low fiber, and lactose. Okay, so dairy, you never want to cut out dairy unless you're getting radiation to the GI tract. Okay. So then in a situation like that, those enzymes may be affected that would normally digest lactose. So it just depends on the treatment plan and where you're getting treatment. But otherwise, milk is a really good choice, and you should not omit it. So that's a very tiny detail I wanted to add in.
Well, it's an important detail because my doctor didn't tell me that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Okay, good. Yeah, it depends where the radiation site is, because the radiation will kill lactase, which would be the enzyme to digest the lactose from the milk. So it doesn't mean that someone's lactose intolerant during these treatments. It just means that their enzymes are being compromised from the treatment, and it will resolve and come back. But just during that time, milk would exacerbate diarrhea. So that's so if like, hey, is he or she getting radiation to the GI tract, and where is that at? Do we need to take a pause on milk? So that's a little bit. But you'd want to reduce your amount of caffeine. Usually children are not having caffeine, but that would exacerbate diarrhea. and then lower fiber. So lower fiber is going to be foods like white breads, white pastas, white rices. Lower fiber fruits and veggies are going to be canned. They're going to have lower fiber. You'd want to make sure to get ones that have lower sugar, like in the low sugar syrup, because a high sugar may make it a little bit worse for the diarrhea. It's mostly fat and fiber that exacerbates diarrhea, not so much sugar. So if your child, let's say they don't really like canned fruit unless it is in some of the sugary syrup, then I would look at the situation and be like, well, I want them eating more, so it's okay to have a little bit more sugar in my canned fruit. We just kind of want to weigh out our options. So cooking our fruits and veggies will help to make them, the fiber, it'll just be lower in fiber and help to reduce the diarrhea side effect. Again, encouraging small, frequent meals so that food's not going through so fast. A really, really high, dense, big meal is just not going to help with the diarrhea. So smaller, more frequent meals. And then as the parent, you can, instead of just like one giant meal and then it's running through your GI tract, right? So then as the caregiver parent, you can watch the clock and schedule in like, okay, let's do more small, frequent meals. And then, talk with your doctor if there's any medications that may help with that. But food first, definitely. Sometimes I get a lot of questions about pro or prebiotics. Again, you'd want to ask your doctor, but really you'd want to just really work with food because you can get those pro and prebiotics from food. But if we're having so much diarrhea, there may be a situation where you would want to replenish. And like I said, I don't want to give out any specific recommendations, but just check in with your doctor about that.
Okay, so we're going to check back in with our doctors, but at the same time, we mentioned dairy and probiotics, and immediately my mind goes to yogurt, but that's a dairy. So if we're not going to use yogurt as a supplement for the probiotics, and we're definitely going to check in with our doctors to see if we should be supplementing at all, but what are other foods that contain probiotics?
Okay, so yes, there are other options of foods to eat that will help, replenish those good bacteria in our gut if dairy is not an option. And remember, we still want dairy to be an option because it has so many calories and nutrients. Honestly, like a cup of milk is proteins, carbs, fat, vitamins, minerals, so many good things. So we don't want to avoid it unless we absolutely have to. And that would be only if you're getting radiation to the GI tract. Okay, so for probiotic sources, there's kimchi, sour pickles, miso paste, sauerkrauts, tempeh, and kombucha. Those would be probiotic sources. And then prebiotic sources that are not dairy, there's a few of them here. There's garlic, asparagus, soybeans, there's kidney beans, there's pistachios, cashews, almonds, an unripe banana. So that's kind of fun if your child doesn't like ripe bananas, they like more unripe bananas. That's a great prebiotic. Barley, onions, pumpkin, peas, and snow peas, leeks, wheat bran, and chickpeas. Those are all going to be great sources to choose.
Oh, that's great. And now that brings me to, I heard the word banana. So anytime as a person that hasn't had cancer, if I'm suffering from vomiting, my doctor says, eat the brat diet, have bananas, applesauce, rice, and toast. So what about people that are on chemo? What should they be focusing on?
So are you talking about specifically for vomiting or for diarrhea?
Vomiting. Did you touch upon everything for?
Yes, I did. So the brat diet is actually used, it's sort of like it could be used, I guess, for diarrhea, or it's an intervention for vomiting. But I wouldn't stick to that because it's so limiting. And then also it's really important as a parent and even for the child, they have to figure out what foods they feel like or that they like. So that's why it's really a good idea to call in the dietitian to, ask these questions about like, hey, we don't like bananas, rice, applesauce, toast. What are some alternative choices? Because there's always more food options and I don't want you or your child to feel limited. We can always come up with alternatives. So with nausea and vomiting, these are the nutrition interventions that you would want to provide to your child as the caregiver and parent. So you'd want to, again, eat small meals, frequent small meals throughout the day. You can use a timer to make sure to remind yourself, or even make it fun and have it for the child. They can set the timer, get them involved, get a cute little timer, a little apple or something pink or whatever you want to do to make them more involved, if that helps them eat more. You want to eliminate exposure to high, like very smelly foods. So depending on, like, even if you're at the hospital, if the food tray comes in with all the plastic or just the way it's presented, that may be a little much for the patient, for the child. So the parent would want to kind of prepare their food or transfer it to a plate that the child likes before it gets in front of them, so that the smells aren't so strong, it immediately turns them off. If you're at home, not using the microwave foods can just, the smell is just really intense and can circulate. Stovetop, same thing. If you can bake something in the oven versus stovetop to kind of keep those smells in, that would also really help keep smells more bland and just not so smelly. Eating cooler, light foods with less odor. So that was kind of the example of like the toast or the rice or the oatmeal, maybe things that are a little bit more bland, room temperature foods or not as hot. Things that are a really intense high temperature is just going to turn someone off that has nausea and vomiting. Liquids you want to do in between meals rather than with meals. So at mealtime, just focus on the food component. Also to avoid or limit the strong smelling of not only food, but other things like lotion, soaps, perfumes, air fresheners, laundry detergent, and listen to your child and ask them. And maybe some things don't bother them, but maybe they do, hey, is this laundry detergent very smelly? Is this, we came home from so-and-so's house, does this smell bother you? Do you want me to wash your clothes? Should we change your clothes? Things like that, just to make them feel like there's less smells, that maybe be agitating them or just kind of overstimulating their nausea they already have. You can rest the head elevated for 30 minutes after eating. That will help with nausea, vomiting. And then, of course, talk with your doctor about any medications that can be prescribed to help with the nausea, vomiting. And then if you're taking any other medications that require food, let's say, the child has to take food with the medication, but they're experiencing nausea and vomiting, more lighter foods like crackers, little things like that, or, a couple pieces of cereal or Cheerios or, Fruit Loops or whatever little types of foods they'd like to nibble on to take with their medication, just making sure it's not a lot of smells. It's not really heavy, just something light. So those are and, just trying to keep them relaxed. And it's funny because they say don't do distraction eating. That's a very bad idea for your relationship with food. And while that's very important, and I do agree with that, it actually, during nausea and vomiting, with such severe nausea and vomiting, it may help to have your child be distracted with a show to eat more. And sometimes not. Sometimes a show's on, then your child would be eating nothing. You wouldn't want that. But if there's a way to distract them from the nausea and vomiting to eat more, and it may not even be screen time. You may just sitting down with your child and eating with them and talking with them may be the distraction that they need to help to encourage them to eat more. So we do use distraction strategies as another consideration when your child is having a lot of nausea or vomiting.
Okay, wow. Mm-hmm. I can see that. I know for my late son, Brody, he wouldn't eat if the TV was on, but my son, his brother, eats. He'll totally eat anything you put in front of him if the TV's on. So there you go. Yeah, perfect. So there you go. Two ends of the spectrum. So that's that seems like it would be an awesome idea. Yes. I have a question about water because taste, smell, temperature, all those things can be changed, and also not mixing it with food, but accompanying it to food. What are your suggestions for that? And also, because there is such a change in taste, is there a particular brand of water, or is water out of the tap better? What are your suggestions surrounding that?
So that's a really great question. So no water is going to be superior. It's personal preference, whether it's out of your, there are certain, if you're living in the US, I guess I shouldn't speak for people around the world, because in different countries, they may have different standards for water coming out of the faucet, but tap water is totally fine and a safe choice. If your child's like, hey mom, I really love the bathroom water or the refrigerator water, those are going to be good choices. It's really personal preference. Any type of bottled water, that's fine. Do not buy that alkaline water. That is just a faux nutrition myth. And I've heard of many people spend a lot of money on that. There's no such thing as an alkaline diet or alkaline water because our body's blood pH cannot be changed with food.
Oh,
and you
wow.
wouldn't even want to, you would not want to even manipulate that because a changed blood pH would lead to being on a ventilator or being on dialysis. Your lungs and kidneys work very hard to keep a very tight pH. So the whole alkaline diet thing is just a huge myth. It's just physiologically, that's not how we function. So skip that. So just regular waters, tap water, whatever your child prefers. If it doesn't taste good to them, spice it up with herbs or put some fruit in there. Make it more room temperature if they're having sensitivity to smell. And then yes, you can also add it into your foods. Like for example, like if you make cereals or soups with water, that counts. But with hydration, it really counts on the urine color because, keep in mind, you can get hydrated from not water, from juices or milks or Pediasure or milkshakes or fruits, veggies. Those will hydrate too. So just always be checking on the urine. And if you can give them water and they drink it, great. But if they can't, there are other alternatives. So just know that you have options.
Okay. And that's good to know. But what about eating and accompanying it with food?
What do you mean?
In terms of we're trying to get as many calories in. So should we be...
Oh, I would choose other liquids first, like Pediasure and milk.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Because there is water. You will be hydrated from eating and drinking other things besides water. So water will definitely hydrate you. That's very important for cell functioning, for normal cell functioning. But just know that it doesn't stop there, that you will get hydrated from Pediasure.
So you're mentioning the liquid foods like Pediasure. Now, that brings me back to something that we talked about in your initial episode, just very vaguely. And we ran over mouth sores. Or we covered mouth sores. So do you have any suggestions for parents of children that have mouth sores?
Yes. So mucositis or esophagitis is basically going to be those mouth sores. So lacerations or inflammation in the mouth or the throat, which obviously would impede eating because it's going to be painful. So of course, with nutrition intervention, it's always important to check with your doctor if there's any medications that can help reduce some of that pain and make eating a little bit easier, because the ultimate goal is to have your child be eating well for growth, but also to support the, battling off the treatment. We need more calories and protein to stay strong, to keep attending those treatments to kill the cancer. So we want to keep them eating. So some nutrition interventions that you can do is you want to choose foods that are lower in acidity, like tomato products, citrus juices, or pickled foods. Mm-hmm. That is going to hurt. So we want to avoid those. Less spicy foods, you want to avoid chilies, chili powder, curries, cloves, black peppers, or hot sauces. Those are also going to be things you want to avoid. You want to choose softer foods in texture with added moistness, softs or gravies. So that'd be like puddings, and maybe like oatmeal wouldn't be a good choice. You could even do like a rice cereal, like a cream of rice cereal, adding in a little bit of brown sugar into that, maybe to make it a little bit more fun in taste. And just want to really reduce textures that are, may just cut in more. So like crackers and things like that would end up cutting, that would not be comfortable, or like pretzels. You can always dip crackers in milk if they like something like that. That's an option. Or skipping that and just kind of going to things like cookies or biscuits and having those are softer. You can dip your cookie in milk. With your biscuit, you can have gravy or jam or butter on that. Maybe warm it up a little bit, make that softer and easier for them to eat. And dipping everything in milk. I mean, and you can have like little picks or something to help them hold the cookie and then dip it in, make it more fun like that. Like Oreos, you can put like a toothpick in it and then you dip it in, and you can make it like a game. So that's like an idea on helping to make things softer. Serving foods more at room temperature, not too hot. I know we just talked about warming up foods to make them softer, but you want to make sure they're more around room temperature, or even cool would help with mouth sores or throat sores when you're eating. Mm-hmm. Smoothies, when you do any type of smoothies, just make sure do more low acid fruits. So more like bland type melons, bananas, peaches. Make sure to add in yogurt, add in milk, add in silken tofu, those things like that. Obviously, avoiding alcohol, tobacco, and mouthwashes. That goes without saying because we're talking about children. For other things that you can do is make sure to encourage good oral hygiene. So you want to, sensitive toothbrushes, but making sure that their mouth is clean. That's going to be very important to help with healing and just having it be as happy of a mouth as we can so we can keep getting food in. You can do a tablespoon of honey dissolved in a cup of warm water. That's kind of fun. Have the child, pour the honey in themselves, and that may be gentler on their mouth and something they can drink.
Unless they are under the age of 2. No honey.
So under the age of 2. Right.
Yes.
So that would be that's a better recommendation for 2 or older, or maybe for adults. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You want to also make sure to avoid carbonated beverages. And then finally, the last recommendation is you can consume ice chips or frozen ice pops. You can make your own, include your child in making those, or try to do different colors, asking them like, hey, which color do you want today? And that would be that would be more for like fluorouracil.
And what kind of ice pops should we make? Because we're not going to use juice.
So, okay. It would be more like yogurt pops.
Okay.
Because you'd want to use yogurt, bananas, melons, peaches or milk. Those are all going to be good ones.
Those actually sound pretty good.
Yeah. So like a peach yogurt. Yeah. You can do that. I would do that. Yeah. So
I have a question. Sorry. I have a question, and maybe you will or won't be able to answer this, but in foods that we buy, sometimes there's bacteria. Is it overrated to say wash the food?
Which foods? It may be. Which foods are we talking about?
Just wash, produce or...
Oh, I see. No, so you'd want to still... during during cancer treatment or not, you'd always want to practice food safety. So ways that you can do that to help keep bacteria down is like canned fruits and veggies, you would just wash the can. You don't need to wash the fruits and veggies in there. But fresh fruits and veggies, you would just wash them underneath water. And you do not need to buy any special spray, and you don't even need to use vinegar. Sometimes people want to use vinegar because washing fruits and veggies underwater kills 98% of bacteria. So it's not going to be any better if you use a wash that you can have at the store to buy, like in the section. That's just like a monetary, trap. You don't need that. Just rinse them with fruits and veggies with water. And then for other foods like meats, yes, it's very important to cook them to the proper temperature. So making sure you have a thermometer, make sure you have a temperature chart so you know which foods to cook. Like, for example, poultry needs to be cooked to 165. So making sure that, and then reheating foods, you can use your thermometer again, and just making sure all reheated foods, no matter what the food, is up to 165.
And I have a question. It kind of piggybacks off of one of the things you mentioned that I thought was really interesting, actually, is washing the can. So when you say wash the can, do you mean when there's like peaches inside, for example? So do you mean actually scrubbing the can clean before we open it so that no bacteria gets in?
Yeah. So, right. So where you're going to put your can opener onto the can. So you're going to clamp it down and then you're going to cut into it and open it up. If there was bacteria like on the outside, it could sneak in. So yes, you're going to wash a dish. That's how I would do it. Like I would take my scrubber with my dish soap and I would wash the top of it, dry it, and then I would open it. Yeah.
That sounds, yeah. I didn't really think about that, but that really sounds important.
Yeah. Good.
Also, other things. I know this, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. If you have been given fresh eggs from somebody that just came out of the chicken and are not from the store, make sure you scrub those eggs before you eat them. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah, that would be, yeah. That's like a can't. So think like, okay, so where has this been? If it's going to be in the chicken cage and there's stool around, I probably wouldn't even do that, to be honest. I would go more through the grocery store because that's going to be regulated. But yes, if you are going to get things that you're not sure where they've been, then I would wash them. But I really, wouldn't recommend that during cancer treatment. I would recommend go to the grocery store because that's very highly regulated.
Yep, at least in the United States for sure. Yeah,
that's true. Good point.
Major standards over here. So my final question for you is, I have just cooked this amazing meal. I decided to put it in the fridge. I reheat it. Can I refrigerate it and eat it again?
Okay, so I would not suggest to reheat the same item. So you cook it, you get it to the right temperature. Okay, check. And then you put it in the fridge, have it go down to the proper temperature, right? Because there's a danger zone where bacteria can grow, going from that, whatever the temperature is, like the 165 down to that 40. So we want to make sure, that's why, once we're done cooking our food, we pack it up and we put it in the fridge because that danger zone is where the bacteria begin to grow. So if you are taking that meal out and reheating it one time and eating it, okay, that's fine. But if you're taking that same meal, reheating it, cooling it, think of when it has to go down through that danger zone, it's being exposed. The bacteria has a chance to get in so many more times when you go from that 165 or whatever the temperature is down to 40. More bacteria has a chance to get back in if it's at that right temperature that it loves when it's cooling off. So if you have a compromised immunity, I would not reheat more than once a food to eat. But if you don't, it's personal preference. But for our kiddos going through treatment, I would just reheat a meal one time.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very informative, and I think listeners will get a lot out of that because I know from my own experience, there was always a question of whether or not to do that. We didn't because there was a question, but it's great to hear it from a professional. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rose.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Living with Scanxiety's last episode of Season 2. Stay tuned because we're going to get started immediately with Season 3.